Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to be joining the debate on Bill C-57. Although I must agree with my Conservative colleagues, it's unfortunate to be doing it under the yoke of time allocation. And it's a strategy that the federal government seems to be employing quite a bit this week. I think, when I was having an exchange with the member for Perth Wellington earlier today about this resembling a student who is missed the due date for his or her homework and is suddenly realizing that it's coming up and we better rush things because we've been wasting all of the time over February, March, April, and May, and now we're almost into June, and you look at the parliamentary calendar, time is suddenly short, and so they're feeling the need to engage in these draconian tactics to limit the ability of members to be here on behalf of our constituents, because every single one of these seats represents a unique geographic area of Canada, and the people of Canada deserve to have their voices, their concerns raised in this House by us, the members who represent them. But that being said, Mr. Speaker, let us now turn to the bill before us, Bill C-57. And I want to compliment my friend and colleague from the riding of Edmonton-Strathcona. She really has just so many incredible decades of experience in the field of environmental sustainability. And really, when she speaks to our caucus, when she delivers speeches in this House and her work at committee, people listen because they realize that this member has the experience, has the knowledge, and very rarely have I seen people contradict her because they know that she's usually right. She has the experience to back it up. And so I just want to walk the House through a little bit of history of how we got to Bill C-57. We'd have to go back to the spring of 2016 when the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development reviewed the current Act. There's a mandate in the Act that it has to be reviewed every certain number of years. I believe it's 3 years. And that's just to make sure that it's staying up to date with, the changing nature of Canada, to see that we're in fact meeting our goals. Does anything need to be tweaked? And has the government been doing a good job in following the existing acts? So that's why it's important, Mr. Speaker. And so as a part of this review, committee, as committees usually do, brought forth witnesses to testify on the current act and to sort of present some recommendations for ideas for reform. Now, witnesses to the committee found the current act lacking in two important ways. First, unlike the definition of sustainable development, it focuses on environmental decision-making and ignores the social and economic pillars of sustainable development. And second, the purpose is about transparency and accountability for environmental decision-making rather than about advancing sustainable development. And the committee agreed with those significant shortcomings, and it recommended that the Act be amended to require the development of an effective federal strategy that will inspire in equal measure environmental, social, and economic advancement towards a better future, something I think that all members in this House can very much agree to. The unfortunate thing is, Mr. Speaker, with the bill before us, Bill C-57, is that it only partially addresses these deficiencies and recommendations. It's important to note that the updated law should reflect the broader UN Sustainable Development Goals as were endorsed by Canada. Now, I want to go back to, before I go to that, I just want to list some key things that came about after that study, because when C-57 made it to the committee, the Liberal government didn't even listen to its own members of Parliament on that committee. It didn't even listen to the recommendations that had come from the Environment Committee. And that's a real shame, because suddenly you have Liberals in a position of recommending something only to see their government completely ignore it. And clearly through that action, I don't think that the government is committed to delivering on its commitments under a broad UN Sustainable Development Goals to ensure the whole of government ensures its laws and policies reflect environmental, social, and economic needs. Now, I want to sort of drill down on that because the member for Edmonton-Strathcona really, was faced with a Herculean task. Many of my colleagues know this who sit on committees. We have one spot. The NDP has one spot on a 10-member committee. And we don't get the luxury of teamwork with other MPs. It often falls upon us. So when it comes to the amending stage of a bill, the clause-by-clause part of a bill, it's a pretty big task. And I can remember doing that last year when I was the justice critic for our party on the Justice Committee, especially when it came to Bill C-46. That was a gargantuan justice bill, and I'll tell you, my staff and I were pretty busy on that. But going back to the matter of hand, Mr. Speaker, on Bill C-57, the member for Edmonton Strathcona, almost all of the amendments that she moved at committee were based on three things. They were based on recommendations from the Commissioner of the Environment. They were based on recommendations from expert witness testimony at the committee, and they were based on recommendations from the committee itself. So she had three very good arguments behind her recommendations. And yet, Mr. Speaker, what did the Liberal-dominated committee do? It voted down those amendments. So, flying in the face of the evidence, and this is a government that likes to pride itself on evidence-based decision-making, and I still have yet to hear a coherent answer from the government side as to why they did that to the honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona when they know that she has all those years of experience, when they know that her amendments were based on solid evidence. Still, we have not received any particular good reasons on that. And I think, you know, given the fact that this House voted today, historically, I might add, on Bill C-262, moved by my honourable colleague from Abitibi, James Bay, Nunavut, EU. He's got a very long riding. But a historic moment for the House of Commons today, because that bill, a private member's bill, passed third reading today and commits the federal government to ensuring that all laws are in compliance with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And as you have it, the member for Edmonton Strathcona, one of her amendments was to ensure that Bill C-57 actually included a reference to UNDRIP. But that was voted down. But then the Liberals decided they would vote in favour of the bill that's now going to mandate it. So try to work your way through the reasoning behind that, Mr. Speaker, because I'm still having some problem doing that. That being said, you know, I mean, UNDRIP has passed this House. It's going to the other place now, and I wish senators well. I certainly hope that they will look at the hard work we did here in the House of Commons, that they will recognize that here in 2018 we are at a place in this great country where no longer can we afford to play the role of a colonizer. We have to make sure First Nations in Canada are the full and equal partners that they very much deserve to be. And it's only when we make sure that all of our federal laws recognize that implicitly that we're going to be able to move beyond our past, while never forgetting it, but moving beyond it to a place where I think most people would like us to be. Mr. Speaker, I know my time is getting short on this bill, so I just want to end with this. The day that the Minister of the Environment moved time allocation on this bill was Tuesday, the very same day that the Liberal government announced it was purchasing the Kinder Morgan pipeline for $4.5 billion. And that's just the price tag for the existing infrastructure. No word on the cost for expanding the pipeline. And I just think that when the Environment Minister is moving to shut down debate on a bill which is seeking to bring federal departments in compliance with sustainable development goals, and yet buys itself a pipeline which is infrastructure that rightly belongs in the 20th century, I think it makes a mockery of this government's real commitment to addressing climate change. I would dearly like to know what federal department is going to now be in control of the Kinder Morgan pipeline and how it can possibly justify its sustainable development when it's going to be operating something that makes a mockery of our climate change commitments, this being 2018, with all of the evidence of climate change all around us. We certainly need this country to be taking a firm and strong direction to address climate change. I think everyone who looks to future generations knows that we owe them that. at this moment in time. Anyways, Mr. Speaker, I will conclude there. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to Bill C-57, and I welcome any questions and comments from my colleagues and friends. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for his contribution to the debate in this late evening. I'm going to start by congratulating him, along with all members of the House, on gaining a share of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. We're all owners together now of a project that would have been profitable had the government just stayed out of the way and then provided the certainty to that company that owned it before, I guess, in being able to build it. I wanted to go and ask the members, because I know we often disagree. We on this side here of the House, our Conservatives, believe in a free market, believe that there is a way to manage a balance between the economy and environment. But we're talking about the Federal Sustainability Development Act. And I know that you Democrats have a different point of view on this, on where that fine balance is sought and reached. So how does he feel that this act finds that balance, and what does he think of seeing the government now in the business of exporting or potentially exporting oil sands energy through the West Coast, all the while talking a good game about promoting environmental stewardship, which I think is quite possible. Obviously, he has a different point of view as a Democrat. So I'm asking the member if you can add further commentary to that, with this dichotomy that has been created by the Liberals.
The honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Well, I thank my colleague very much for his question. It's true that we in the NDP do have different views on why this is a bad idea. And what I will say to this to the workers in Alberta, my brother being one of them who's involved in the industry, stopping the Kinder Morgan expansion is not going to stop the oil sands working right now, and no one in this House wants that. And furthermore, Kinder Morgan was devised at a time when oil prices were around $100 a barrel. It's exporting diluted bitumen, which is the rawest form of the product. We're not getting any value for this. So if we want our oil industry to in fact be sustainable, I would make the argument that we would want to sell it for the most value possible, not bargain basement prices. And I just think that if we're going to talk about Canada's energy security as a country, it doesn't involve building a pipeline which is going to direct exports to China. This is not in any way leading to Canada's energy security. So I would just say that I just think that makes a mockery of this government's sustainable development goals, especially in light of Bill C-57.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for London, Middlesex, Elgin.
All good. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your speech. We've talked a lot of course, in this House about the carbon tax. And, a lot of times we have some people saying, well, it's going to create the sustainability, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. And I just would like your personal view on that. Do you believe that this government, from what we just saw in the last couple of days with $4.5 billion going to Kinder Morgan and things like that, do you think they're actually going to take that money from the carbon tax and actually put it into technologies that are going to make more sustainable developments? I know many Canadians are hoping that's what they'll do with their hard-earned dollars, but do you think that this government's actually going to put it aside, or do you believe, or does the member believe, sorry, I will listen to you, or does the member believe that it will just go into the coffers and get ill-spent?
The honourable member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
I'd like to thank my colleague for that question. We've heard a lot of discussion about the carbon tax at the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, and we have heard from a lot of witnesses, farmers in particular, who are quite concerned with the impact a carbon tax will put on their operations. And I very much empathize with those farmers, but I think there's a way to design a carbon tax so that those who are in industries and businesses that are still very reliant on fossil fuels for their operations, I think there's a way to design the carbon tax to mitigate the worst effects on them, while also respecting the need to put a price on pollution. Because I very much believe that with higher prices being put on this, it starts changing the conversation. And I know where I'm from. I mean, gas is selling at $1.50 a litre on Vancouver Island. So that certainly led to the conversation around my constituents about, geez, how fast can I get an electric car because these prices are killing me.
Resuming debate.